Good morning for those on the West Coast, good afternoon, and good evening for Noah and Israel and anybody else who may be joining us. Thank you very much for being with us. This is the first in a series of 3 author spotlight series showcasing acclaimed Israeli and Canadian authors and celebrating Hebrew University's centennial anniversary. My name is Ayala, and I'd like to introduce my colleague Esther, who's based in Toronto, and she's actually the driving force behind this program. I'd like to extend a thank you to our volunteer book club committee, Cynthia Knight, Joanne Goldman, and Panina Pinchesky. Now to introduce our author, Noa Yedlin. Noa is a Hebrew University alumna. She's an Israeli author and the recipient of multiple literary awards. She's the author of the best-selling House Arrest, People Like Us, The Wrong Book, and Stockholm, which we'll be discussing this afternoon, and was named by Haaretz magazine one of 66 Israeli women you should know. Yedlin is also the creator of 2-season TV series based on her best-selling novel, Stockholm. The series has been remade in German and by CVT Sweden. Her best-selling novel, People Like Us, is currently being adapted into a TV series in Israel, and a stage adaptation of House Arrest is now playing at Beit Lessin Theater in Tel Aviv. Noa is considered one of Israel's top writers. Her novels, widely known for their dark and subtle humor, sketch with biting precision the complex relationships both within the family and outside of it, while capturing and deconstructing the spirit of the times. So welcome, Noa. And
thank you very much.
And you're welcome. And we also welcome Cynthia Knight, who's today's moderator. She is the co-creator, head writer, and showrunner of the critically acclaimed award-winning dramatic comedy series Mohawk, which is actually Canadian and was nominated for multiple Canadian Screen Awards. Cynthia presently has multiple projects in development and has worked as a story editor as well as consulting producer on various digital series. She's a graduate of McGill University and an alumna of the Hebrew University's one-year program. She also teaches classes and workshops about writing for television, including her highly sought-after online course, The Secrets of Writing Hit TV Series, which actually, Cynthia, sounds really interesting. I'd like to ask everyone to make sure that you're muted during their conversations. You can type your questions into the Q&A box, and there will be time after the conversation for more questions. So welcome, Noa and Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's
You're
a pleasure
welcome.
to be here. Should I tell a little bit about what the plot of Stockholm? So we'll all be on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So Stockholm tells the story of 5 friends, 3 men and 2 women. They're all in their late 60s. They have been friends for 50 years, some of them even longer. And one of them is a very prominent professor of economics. He's mentioned time and time again as someone who has very good chances of winning the Nobel Prize for economics. But unfortunately, one night he is found dead in bed. It's not a spoiler. It happened right at the beginning of the book. He's found dead in bed. Apparently, he suffered a heart attack. And since he lives alone, he doesn't have children, he's not married. His friends are the ones who find his body. And just before they start working out the funeral arrangements, one of them says, well, it's such a shame, you know, it's only 8 days before the Nobel Prize for economics are announced, and it should have been his year. And then they come up with this idea, why not conceal his death, not tell anyone for 8 days, only 8 days that he's dead, thereby giving him the opportunity to win the thing that he wanted more than anything, which is the Nobel Prize. You should know that you can only win the Nobel Prize if you're alive. You have to be alive at the time of the announcement. You're very welcome to die between the announcement and the ceremony. There are 2 months there, and you can die as much as you want and still get the award. Or better yet, someone else would get it on your behalf. But you have to be alive at the time of the announcement. And so they decide to conceal his death for merely 8 days. How difficult could it be to answer a few text messages on someone's behalf? As it turns out, it's much more difficult than they expected. First of all, because things tend to be more complicated than we expect. This is life. as you probably all know. And second of all, because if things didn't get complicated, then there wouldn't be a book and there wouldn't be a television series. So things have to get complicated, and I can assure you that they do. We'll watch some of those complications later on. I think that we're starting with a clip from the television series that was made based on the novel. I'm going to give the context to this short video. The four friends who are still alive, they take turns watching over the body. They sit in his living room and just make sure that nothing out of the ordinary happens. And suddenly something out of the ordinary does happen. So we'll watch the clip and see what happens.
You see it?
Yeah.
בטח מישהי שהזדיינה איתו.
מאיפה את ישר מניחה כזה דבר?
את פגשת פעם את אבישי?
אני לא מבינה, הסיבה היחידה להגיע למישהו בבית הזה רק כי את שכבת איתו, אולי זו סטודנטית שלו.
היא סטודנטית שלו שהזדיינה איתו.
אוי, באמת, תני לי.
מה זה?
זה הנייד של אבישי.
מה? תראה. יואו.
את חושבת שזה ממנו?
לא, זה לא ממנו.
לא.
ברור שזה ממנו.
מה כל כך ברור?
אנחנו צריכות לעקוב אחריה.
תעזבי.
אל תגידי לי, אני מדברת ברצינות. נו, תצאי מהר לפני שהיא תתרחק ולא תמצאי אותה.
תצאי את.
ואת תישארי עם אבישי?
היא מעשנת.
מה, מצאת אותה?
היא מעשנת בהיריון.
גם התינוק יכול לעשן. עם הגנים של אבישי, הוא עדיין יצא בסדר.
היא הולכת.
אז תעקבי אחריה.
בסדר.
מעניין כמה זמן הם ביחד.
את לא יכולה להניח שהם ביחד, אנחנו אפילו לא שמענו על הבחורה הזאת.
אם יש לה איחור, זה מינימום חודש, מה שאומר שהביוץ היה לפני 5 שבועות, ויש להניח שהיא לא נכנסה להיריון על הזיון הראשון.
אולי זה היה חד פעמי?
באמת, את ראית אותה, היא מתקרבת ל-40, סטטיסטית זה יפה, זה 15 זיונים כדי שטעות כזאת תקרה. אם לא 500.
All right. This is I've been waiting for this part of the night because I too am a writer, although not a novelist, a screenwriter. And to be able to read a novel like this that's so unique and surprising and has such an original, fresh premise, I've been trying to ask you so many questions. So I'm going to jump right in. What is the inspiration? Where did the idea for this novel and this premise come from?
So I should say right from the start that this is not an autobiography. I myself never hid a dead body, not for more than 3 or 4 days. So this is not a true story. It all started when I met my best friend for lunch. It was a few years ago. We met for lunch. She has 4 children. Back then they were very young, and she was in a very bad mood. And I asked her what happened, and she said that she went over to visit another friend of hers. This is going to be one of those stories, my friend, her husband, her cousin. So you all have to stay focused, okay? You have to remain concentrated. So she went over to visit another friend of hers who's married to a very, very famous Israeli film director, very famous. And when she was over at their house, she saw on the computer screensaver a picture of her friend and her husband walking the red carpet, the actual Hollywood red carpet. And my friend told me that she went back home to her 4 children and the breastfeeding and the diapers and all that jazz. And she told me, in my entire life, I have never felt more lame, boring, unglamorous, and miserable than I did watching them walking red carpets and me with my, all this. And I listened to her, and with half of my mind, I comforted her. Writers, one of many reasons why you should not befriend writers is that they only always give you half of their mind. And so with half of my mind, I started consoling her and telling her that she's very glamorous in her own unique way, and that she's going to get even more glamorous as time goes by, especially if she stops having children at a certain point. But with the other half of my mind, I started smelling a novel. And the reason that I started smelling a novel is that I thought to myself, well, everyone always talks about what's it like to be a friend in a time of need, right? A friend in need is a friend indeed. And it's very obvious why we like talking about that. It's because it's a very noble value to help your friend when they need you, and it's very nice to brag. But the one thing that no one ever talks about is what it's like to be a friend in a time of success. And the reason for that is also very, very, very clear, because there is absolutely nothing you can say other than, I am happy for my friend, period, and the conversation is over. Even though you may have other feelings as well. It doesn't mean that you're a horrible human being. It just means you're a human being, right? It means that sometimes you may be jealous. Sometimes a friend's success may cause you to examine your own life, your own achievements, the mistakes that you have done, the choices that you have made. And so I thought to myself, well, if I take people that are caught in the spotlight, they're caught in the Nobel spotlight, but it's there not to shine on them. They're just caught there by mistake. I thought it's a very interesting opportunity to discuss that question of friendship, of aging, of choices, of life choices, and so this was the beginning.
I was going to ask you next about your creative process, but actually, since you're talking about the characters and what you wanted to explore and all the complexities of friendship, I'm going to keep on that and jump right into characters. So we'll go back to the creative process after. Reading your novel, one of the burning questions I had, I'm so often given the note, you have to make them likable. People have to relate. People have to like them. I once got a note of like, don't have her eat ice cream. It makes her look weak. Or don't have her yell at her neighbor. I mean, yeah. So your characters are so flawed and complex, and you really delve into the multiple feelings they have of envy and jealousy and also support. And did you have any concerns, or was that ever a thought of yours of like, are they too flawed? Do I have to make them likable?
The way that I see it, I think that there is absolutely no difference whatsoever between us sitting here tonight, actual human beings, right? No doubt about that, we're human beings. There is no difference between us and between literary characters. I think it's exactly the same thing. I think that us sitting here tonight, we all have our desires, our flaws, our secrets, our families, our relationships, our jobs, our diseases, etc., 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 everything that makes us human. And literary characters have all those exact things. They have all the exact same complexities. They must have all of those things. Otherwise, it wouldn't interest us to read about them. Why should you read as such a complex creature, full of contradictions, full of conflict, full of everything that you've been through up until this moment in your life? Why should you be interested in reading about this, plastic made in China character that has one conflict, one flaw, one good trait? It's not possible. The only difference that I can accept between literary characters and actual human beings is that us, actual human beings, we were lucky enough or unlucky enough, it depends on your perspective, to be born in the real world. Whereas literary characters were lucky enough or unlucky enough, again, it depends on your worldview, to be born in a book. This is a difference, but this is the only difference that I can expect. I can't tell you that when I write, sometimes I write things about the characters and I ask myself, okay, I know that the character is not called Noa. She's called a different name, but it's my name on the cover. Who am I kidding? People are going to read this and they're going to think, who had all these horrible thoughts, all these petty, lame, unnoble feelings and thoughts? And then I remind myself something that I already know, and that is I am not special enough to be the first person ever to have a thought, a desire, a problem, a petty feeling. No, if people are going to read those horrible moments, they're not going to say, oh my God, this is such a horrible person who wrote this. They're going to say, oh my God, I'm so happy to find out that I'm not alone in the universe. I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one flawed. And I think that this is the biggest power of reading and of literature. It gives you company to your many flaws. It reminds you that you're not alone in the universe, and it reminds you that silently. It doesn't shout, oh, you're fucked up as well. Am I allowed to say fucked up on it's not national television, right? Okay, so it's okay. You're not the only one. I like that as well. You discover that you're part of a flawed humankind, and you discover it by yourself. And I think this is something that cannot be matched by any other experience. This was a very long answer, right?
Oh, it's great. It's so satisfying because, of course, we want to read about flawed characters and their journeys, but your characters, I mean, at the beginning, when you start hearing their petty, jealous thoughts, you're sort of shocked and taken aback. But that's what makes their kind of arc and experience all the more gratifying. So, how do you decide? How did you decide for this book? Like, once you had decided on this premise, how did you decide on who the characters are? How did you build them out?
Well, these characters, they're in their late 60s. And for example, if one of the characters is 67 years old, then some people say, well, in order to write about a 67-year-old person, you need to know who they are at 67, and then you can start going forward and writing your novel. But the way that I see it, I think that a 67-year-old person is nothing but the sum of the 67 years that they've been through before they have reached my book. A 67-year-old person is the sum of parents, children, relationships, jobs, etc., 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 choices, circumstances, everything they've been through. This is who they are. And in order to know my characters, I have to know what they've been through before they got to this point which is the beginning point of my book. And that means that I have, I think the most important part of preparation for writing a novel for me is creating the characters. And this is something that I do before I even write one word of the novel. This is something that I do in a private file, a private Word file that no one can ever read, not without losing their lives immediately. This is a file that is, I call it the characters. I don't like wasting inspiration when it's not necessary, so I just call it the characters. And by the way, later on, when I write my book, I call the file the book. And my mother once told me that, I know that your mother is here in the audience, so maybe she's going to relate to this little story. My mother once told me that I'm doing a very big mistake by calling the book file the book. Because if people broke into my house, they would know how to get exactly to the right file. And then I thought to myself that this must be the purest definition of mother's love, that there is actually someone out there in the universe that believes that the motivation of Israeli criminals is to lay their hands on her daughter's unfinished manuscript. But this is besides our point. So, but we're now in the character file. So this is a file that is like my private room. And I actually sit down and I build a biography to each and every character. If you take me through all these 5 characters of Stockholm, I can tell you who their parents were, what their parents did for a living, what kind of childhood they had. I think that your childhood is part of who you are, even if you're 70. I think it's a major part of who you are. I think that even though your parents may be dead for many years, your parents, they go through your bloodstream every day that you are alive, till the day you die. You have to know who the characters' parents were. You have to know what kind of experiences they've been through. You have to know who they are. And so when it comes to Stockholm, I always like to brag that when it comes to Stockholm, if, let's say, there are 5 characters, each, let's say they're 70 years old, that means I had to cover 5 times 70. That means 350 years of biography before I could even write a single word of the novel. But I don't know if it sounds like a nightmare or it sounds like a lot of fun. For me, this is paradise. There is nothing as fun as creating human beings that just accidentally didn't get the chance to be born. It's very, very nice. I like it.
That does sound like a lot of work. But you chose to write an ensemble. So when you are developing those characters and figuring out the backstory, are you doing it in a way that's like whatever comes to mind and just kind of playing and having fun? Or do you develop the characters in line with a theme? Like if you want to talk about aging or mourning or friendship, or we'll talk about theme later a bit, but whatever the kind of primary thrust of the novel is, do you create them thinking, okay, you want 5 different characters who have different points of view on your main theme? Is that a part of it, or is it more just sort of random fun of creating 5 people?
It's a very good question, because even if I try, my goal is usually to try and create 5 actual human beings, regardless of what the book is about. Because things happen to people not because they were meant or built for them to happen to them. They just happen to people. Your friend can die regardless if you're a dental hygienist or a broker or I don't know, geography teacher, right? And regardless if you're modest or I don't know, or so I try to create actual human beings, and I try to not think of the theme of the novel. I trust myself that if I create human beings who are complicated enough, who are realistic enough, who are complex enough, then they will be able to take on whatever it is I'm gonna throw at them at page 50 or 60 or 100. You know, I tap them on the butt at the first page of the, you know, I do like this, you know, go ahead. And I tell them, I'm go ahead and walk into my book. I'm really sorry for what I did to you on page 37. Please forgive me. But if I did my job properly, then you will definitely react in an interesting, complex, and human way. Having said that, of course, I know what my book is about. I do know what it's about, and this is not an arbitrary piece of reality. This is a novel, and it was meant to be interesting. It can be realistic but boring, you know. No, it has to be interesting. Things have to happen. So of course I have that in mind, and when I make my many decisions as for who they are, I keep that in mind, but I try not to keep it too much in mind because I don't want it to be artificial. I don't want it to be, I want it to be realistic, because I come from the realistic party, realistic side of the spectrum. It's a spectrum like everything else nowadays.
So what happens after? So you spend all this time thinking about and building your characters and compiling this document and figuring out their backstory and their family and what led them to the moment where we're going to start to see them. And then what's your creative process after that? Where do you go from there?
Well, actually, I think that the most difficult part comes before building the characters, because once I have my plot, and once I sit down and I create these characters, and once I feel that they are well done, then I can start writing. I can start the writing process. But I think the most difficult part of the creative process, at least for me, is looking for the idea, is finding a good story. I told you the story about my 4 children friend, but this was first of all, this was the beginning of a process, because this was just the beginning of the idea. But before that, I was looking for a good idea for a very long time. You know, I travel a lot in Israel and outside of Israel, and I think that the thing that I hear most from people, I wonder if you hear that as well. People hear what I do for a living, and then they say, "Oh, you know, I have so many ideas. I have so many ideas for novels." And then they say what they don't have. I don't have the talent. I don't have the self-discipline. I don't have. And whenever I hear that, I'm so jealous, because I don't have many ideas for novels. I have very few ideas, and most of them are bad or even horrible. And in a way, I know it sounds maybe strange, but I think it's a lot like dating. I don't know about you, but I haven't dated for many years now, thank God. But I remember what dating is, and I guess everyone here remembers what dating is. And when I used to date, you know, there were many men that I would meet for coffee, right? half an hour, what's the harm? There were much fewer men that I would spend 6 months with, and obviously much fewer men that I would spend the rest of my life with. And writing a novel is the exact same thing, you know. There are many nice ideas out there that I would happily have a cup of coffee with. But when it comes to writing a novel, I have to ask myself, okay, this idea, it's nice, but do I really want to wake up to this idea space every morning for the next 3 years? Okay, it's not, you know, it's not a Catholic wedding, but it's a, I don't know, Elizabeth Taylor wedding, you know? Do I really want to go to sleep with this idea space every night for the next couple of years? And most ideas, as most men, don't make that cut. So finding the idea for me is the most difficult part of the process, and building the characters is actually the maybe this is one of the reasons why it's so much fun, because it means that I already have a story, I have an idea. I only need to create these people, and this is a lot of fun.
I love that analogy to dating. I might have to steal it. Thank you for sharing.
Go ahead, be my guest.
So then, okay, so you're saying that's the hard part, and I completely agree, to find the idea that's a great idea that you want to spend your life with. So after you heard that story from your friend and you started to think of friendship and the complexities of friendship, especially when someone is very successful, how was it, a long period or a difficult period to get from that idea to your plot of this group of people, their friend dies and they hide the body?
You know, first of all, I went home from that lunch and I said, okay, so I'm interested in being a friend at a time of success, right? But what is success? What is success in the Western world? We live in such a postmodern era. Who decides what success is, and who determines who's more successful than whom? And then I said, okay, but there are two major symbols of success that you can hardly argue with. And that is the Oscars, which was which was part of my friend's story. So obviously it was deep in my mind, and the Nobel Prize. And the Nobel Prize, I think, wins over, because movies, we all watch the same movies and we all have our opinions, right? That one should have won, that one shouldn't have won. But the Nobel Prize is not the same thing. If a friend tells you that they won the Nobel Prize for cracking the ribosome, I don't know, you don't go and say, oh, I could have cracked that ribosome just as well, you know, I'm not impressed. No, the Nobel Prize is basically God, or whoever you believe in, the universe, just coming down, pointing at someone and saying, it's him, he's it, and there's no arguing after that. And that was why I chose the Nobel Prize. But then there was the question of okay, someone is going to be nominated or win the Nobel Prize, and so what? And I started thinking maybe they're gonna accompany him to Stockholm to receive the Nobel Prize, since he doesn't have a close family. And then I thought, well, maybe he's going to die on the way, and they're going to be forced to accept the prize on his behalf. I had all these ideas. I actually I wrote to the Nobel Committee, the actual Swedish Nobel Committee. I wrote to them. I sent them a very bizarre list of questions that all had to do with death and dying. If someone dies a day before they receive the award, if someone dies a day after, death, dying all around. But being the Swedes that they are, they did not alert the FBI, but they actually answered all my questions. And so it was a long process of thinking what exactly is going to happen with this Nobel Prize, and how are the friends going to fit in. And you're very right saying that here comes the question of what exactly do I want to talk about? Do I want to talk about friendship? Do I want to talk about success? Do I want to talk about us comparing ourselves to others? Because I felt that there are so many interesting things that circle this plot, I felt that it's a good one. I hope that I was right,
You were right.
I'm very happy.
So did you have one like overarching, you said to talk about friendship or jealousy or loss or death, or what did you always think I want to talk about all those things, or was there one kind of overarching one that was the main thematic thrust of the book?
I found out that it's only after I finish writing a novel, and sometimes long after the novel was published, that I realized what is it really about. Because there's the obvious, it's about friendship, and it's about aging, and it's about many things, and it's of course it's about all those things. But it takes me time to understand what is it really about. And I think that it may surprise you, but eventually I think that all my novels, and Stockholm included, are about normalcy and our relationship with normalcy and with being normal. And I think our relationship with normalcy are one of the most interesting relationships we have in our lives. We all have a very complicated relationship with the question of being normal. We want to be normal, we want to be abnormal in other aspects. Some of us feel too much normal, too normal. Others feel and no one feels normal all around. And I feel that by taking this group of whatever normal means, and I mean, they're not bizarre 70-year-olds. Maybe in the book they act in a bit of a bizarre way, but they're all, they're from academia, and they have grandchildren and children, and they live in Tel Aviv, and they're middle upper class. They're your parents, and they're my parents, and but I think that taking these people, these so-called normal people, and throwing them into such an abnormal situation, I think I forced them to meet with their own normalcy and abnormalcy. And this is a meeting that I always like to watch and to create. I think it's an interesting meeting. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah,
I tried to.
No, it's great. And I love that because you do explore all these themes, and yet there's the best stories are ones where when the author says, like, it's actually about this, like, you don't even realize, you're feeling it and you're absorbing it and you're relating to it, but you don't even realize it's about X. Before I want to ask one more question about characters and then the title, and then I think we're going to open it up to audience questions. You said the characters are nearly 70 and they're late 60s. I'm guessing you are much younger than that. So how do you get into the mindset, and how do you tell these authentic and relatable and true stories and experiences of these characters and their struggles at that age when you're not in that group?
First of all, I want to thank you for assuming that I'm not 70, because I once had the misfortune of speaking in front of high school students. And I told them that I was not 70, and I thought that this was a really hilarious joke. And they stared at me with those blank teenage eyes, you know. You could see them thinking, you know, she could be 20 and she could be 115, and we couldn't care less. So yeah, I'm not 70. And when I wrote Stockholm, I was even less 70 than I am today. And you know, many times people ask me, did I do research? You know, did I go to 70-year-old people and ask them, excuse me, ma'am, excuse me, sir, could you please tell me what's it like to be 70? And the answer to that is no, because the way that I see it, you cannot research how people feel. You can only research facts, but you cannot research how people feel. And the reason for that is very simple. I think the superpower of writers is being able to penetrate a character's soul, to sit down on the ground of the soul, to look around and to see everything, all the petty thoughts, all the ugly thoughts, all the embarrassing thoughts, all the nice things as well. We see everything. And on the way from our inside and out onto the real world, we edit, right? We screen. We offer the world an edited version of ourselves because we want people to like us and we want people to think we're normal, and etc., etc. And the inevitable result is that our most interesting thoughts are the ones that we don't articulate out loud. I think the things that define a character more than anything else are the things that the character would never say out loud. And I cannot go to a 70-year-old person or to any other person for that effect and ask, excuse me, sir, excuse me, ma'am, could you please tell me what is it that you would never tell anyone out loud? It's not a possible question and it's not a fair question. And so this was not an option. And the way that I did relate to those 70-year-old people is by saying, you know, literature, it has this universal aspect. It can't be that only 70-year-old people would be able to read Stockholm. If it only relates to 70-year-old people, that means it's not a good novel. It has to have something to say to everyone. And for example, if we're talking about aging, you and I are aging by the day, the same way that 70-year-old people are aging, aren't we? We are nearing our death every day that passes by. This is a universal experience. It's not unique to older people. Looking around you and comparing yourself to others, trying to understand the choices that you took in life, that you made. Were they right? Were they wrong? Trying to figure out what is it that you can still change about your life, and what is it that it's too late to change by now. These are all the most basic human experiences, and it doesn't matter if you're 70 or you're 50 or you're 30. I mean, it matters, obviously, but I think that the core has to be universal. And this was my gate to relate and to enter and to identify with those characters.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I'm surprised. And it's funny, as you said, don't ever like talk to a writer because their brain is split in two. So half of my brain is like listening and half is like, okay, so if that's not how I work. So if I did that in my work, anyway, that was so interesting. So we're going to open it up to audience Q&A. And I know you have another wonderful clip to show. Do you want to show the clip now and then we'll do a Q&A, or do you care, or we'll end with the clip?
Whatever you say, you're the boss.
I like that. Okay, let's jump into Q&A because the clip is so great. Well, we can end with that. So we'll do 10 minutes of Q&A. You're welcome to write a question in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves. I believe anyone's able to unmute themselves. And as people are thinking of questions, I want to ask a last quick question. The title, so you said you don't waste creative energy or inspiration, which I love. So you call it the book, and then how did you come up with the title for this?
Wow, this was one hell of a headache. It was very, very, very difficult to find a title for this novel. I had two titles which I thought were perfect, but it turned out that there were already books by this name, Israeli books by the same name. This was very, very, very depressing for me. And I thought of so many. I had a file called Names. I had a file called Names, and I had dozens of potential names. And I like names that have only one word in them. Not all my novels have only one word in them, but if I manage to limit it to one word, I'm happy. And one evening, I just thought to myself, well, Stockholm is kind of like the Zion of this novel. You know, it doesn't take place in Stockholm. It takes place mostly in Tel Aviv. There's maybe one or two scenes that do take place in Stockholm, but Stockholm as I don't have a better metaphor than Zion. You know, the place where you wish to go to or to be worthy of, etc., etc. And that was it. I fell in love with Stockholm.
And it works on so many levels, so it's so satisfying.
Thank you.
Joanne Goldman wrote, thank you so much for this fantastic book and discussion. Can you talk about the experience of the book being adapted to a TV series?
This was a very, very good experience for me. Obviously, it's a complicated experience. There are so many differences between a book and a television series. I think for me, one of the most difficult parts, I should mention that I was the one who wrote the screenplay. I was the one who adapted it. So it's not, I didn't have the experience of letting go and giving it to someone else and just, you know, coming to see the result. I was part of the entire process. I was part of the casting. I was part of each and every part of the way. But writing the adaptation, I think the most difficult part for me was the fact that my books are filled with internal world, internal thoughts. There's pages and pages and pages of the characters' thoughts and their internal world. There's no other way to say it. And as you know much better than I do, you cannot show a character on television standing and thinking her thoughts, as fascinating as they may be. Something has to happen. And this something has to happen part really got on my nerves. I felt that this was not for me. I'm not a something has to happen person. I'm someone has to have a feeling person. And this was, I think, the most difficult part for me, realizing that that there needs to be some kind of a visual manifestation of everything that is happening. This was, I think, the biggest challenge. But and also, you know, it's really funny. Again, it's really fun to talk about this with someone who comes from this field. You know, they always say that all the money is in television, right? That's why no one writes books anymore, because it's all on television, and writers, obviously, they're poor, they don't have any money, there's no money in literature. And of course, in a way, or in more than one way, it's very true. But in another way, it's not true. Because when I sit in my little room, wearing nothing but my pajamas, and, you know, looking like hell, and just sitting, me and my Word document, it's true that I may have no money, but I can write whatever I want. I can write, I am free of all limitations of geography, of money, of time, of space, of everything. And once you get to television and you have that money illusion, ironically, this is where you meet the money limitations, because everything costs money, and everything costs a lot of money. And you have to constantly adapt your art to the most mundane and prosaic limitations, right? And so this was, I mean, I'm just, you know, it's on the, just a little bit, a few examples, because I can talk on and on about the experience of the adaptation, but all in all, I had a lot of fun, and I'm now actually adapting another novel of mine into television. We're starting to shoot in a few months, so yeah, so it's nice.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank
I
you.
could talk to you all day about adaptation and TV
Me
versus
too.
art. I'd love to do that anytime, but I won't hog all the room. So Penina, you have a question. Can you unmute yourself, or can Ayala?
תודה, Noa. I read the book, of course, in Hebrew and loved it. In a way, you
Thank you.
answered my question, because obviously the book is so universal. It's about the internal world. It's applicable to any culture, any society. However, my question was, what I was wondering, how much writing, your process is influenced by you being Israeli, living in Israel, affected by the culture, the news, the trauma. But in a way, I think you answered by saying that you kind of disconnect when you're in your room. You kind of disconnect from external pressures.
Still, you're asking post October 7th or in general?
General, and of course, now I think about this, it's yeah, like, but in general, yeah.
First of all, in general, I would say that I would never write about people who are not Israeli. I think there is enough people to write about Americans and to write about Chinese and everyone else. I live in Israel. I'm Israeli. My language is Hebrew, and my characters, as well educated and well traveled, and you know, they're very people of the world, but still they're Israeli. And I think that in that sense, my books are very Israeli. And the language is also a very important part of them. I think for people who read Hebrew, this is more obviously, this is more evident. Their language is very contemporary. And I also think that this kind of a friendship that is portrayed in Stockholm is eventually, there's something very Israeli about it. It can be understood by other people because everyone knows what friendship is. Again, the core is universal, but still there is something very Israeli about their connection. I do want to say something about post-October 7th. You know, October 7th there is so much to say about October 7th and about writing after October 7th. I'm just going to say a few words because we're also almost out of time. But I think that after October 7th, everyone was so shocked and traumatized that for writers, there was this question of, are we even going to write anymore? I mean, what are we going to write? Everything seems banal and trivial. You don't want to live to see the day that reality beats literature. This is a day that one does not want to witness, and unfortunately, we got to witness it. This is everything that happened. If I wrote it in a book, then people would say that this is far-fetched. So there was this question of, are we even going to write? Who needs writing anymore? And what are we going to write? I think that of course, every writer has their own answer, and it's very different answers. I think for me, there was a moment a few weeks after October 7th. There was a moment that I felt myself, I touched myself, and I realized that I'm alive. I survived. Not everyone survived. Many people died, but I didn't. And if I'm alive, I'm going to write, because this is the only way that I know of being alive. This is my way of living, and this is my way of interpreting the human condition. And maybe most important than everything, I think that writing truth and writing about truthful and actual people, I think this is the best way to honor both the living and the dead. To honor the essence of being human. So this was for me the answer, and of course it's a very complicated subject, but I hope I answered.
That's a great way to end this section, and thank you for sharing that. And before we go, Ayala, can we play this other clip?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to give a quick context.
Yeah.
The friends find out that the deceased sister is about to come over to sleep at his house. It turns out that she comes to sleep there once a week. She has her healing classes on Sunday mornings in Tel Aviv. And she's about to come, and she doesn't know that her brother is dead. And they are forced to move the body from the deceased house to another person's house. And this is what happens.
תשאר פה, תמשיך, תפגע ותברח כמו בן אדם נורמלי. פאק. אני הרגתי אותו, הוא מת. אדוני, סליחה.
למה, מה מת? איזה מת? מה פתאום?
אבל הוא לא נושם, סליחה, אדוני.
הוא שיכור. אבישי.
גם אנשים בני 70 משתכרים לפעמים. איך קוראים לך? באסם. הוא לא זז, אתם בטוחים שהוא חי? סליחה, אדוני. אדוני, סליחה.
יותר חי מזה כבר לא יהיה.
חמי, משהו לא בסדר איתו, אני אומר לכם, צריך להזמין לו אמבולנס.
הוא בסדר.
סליחה, אני רופאה, אני ראיתי אתכם מהאוטו ועצרתי. מה קרה לו?
הוא סתם, הוא השתכר, הוא קצת שיכור, אנחנו נקחים אותו הביתה. קדימה, אבישי.
אני דרסתי אותו, הוא מת.
אתה דרסת אותו? לא, מה פתאום? איך קוראים לך?
באסל.
איך?
באסל.
עם האופניים החשמליים עברת על הגוף שלי.
צוהר, תרגעי בבקשה.
נילי, הוא דרס את האיש הזה.
מה פתאום? איזה שטויות, זה שום דבר. בבוקר הוא כבר יקום כמו חדש.
יש רופאה שם.
סליחה, איזה רופאה את? סליחה.
רופאה טובה מאוד.
לא, אני מתכוון המטולוגית, אונקולוגית, איזה רופאה?
בבקשה. יש אישור? כן.
אני לא יודע. נראה לי שצריך להזמין אמבולנס וגם משטרה לדווח על תאונה. הוא לא נושם, יא עמי, מה?
מה, ואתה לא מפחד
שמה?
אתה יודע.
שמה, שנהגת על המדרכה?
שיחשבו שזה פיגוע דריסה.
מה פתאום פיגוע? אתם אמרתם לי ללכת ואני נשארתי. אני זה שרוצה להזמין אמבולנס, מה פיגוע?
ברור, אני רק מקווה שהמשטרה גם תראה את זה ככה.
אני לא דואג, תדע לך, המשטרה מתייחסת אחלה למיעוטים.
אבל אתם תגידו להם שזה לא פיגוע.
בטח שנגיד, מה זאת אומרת? אם נספיק נגיד, מה? אתה הרי חוקי, נכון?
אני עושה תואר שני בפילוסופיה של המדעים באוניברסיטת תל אביב.
אז בכלל, מקסימום תפסיד סמסטר, מה אתה עושה?
אבל אתם בעצמכם אומרים שלא קרה לו כלום.
בדיוק, הם יבדקו ויראו את זה בעצמם, אתה מבין? אני מאוד סומכת על הבדיקות של השב"כ.
אבישי.
וואי, מה אני אגיד לאבא שלי? מה שבקתי?
אל תדאג, לא כל כך מהר עושים פה בתים במדינה הזו.
אבא שלי הוא נשיא בית המשפט המחוזי בחיפה, הוא גר בדניה. טוב, אולי באמת עדיף ש...
כן.
היה לך חלום רע, זה
אני אקח את החבר שלכם.
כן, אנחנו נסתדר, תודה.
אתם צריכים משהו בשביל ביטוח?
הכל בסדר, לא קרה שום דבר, תדאג לעצמך.
טוב, אם אתם צריכים משהו, הטלפון שלי זה 052.
כן, באמת, הכל בסדר, לך כבר.
קדימה, אני מאחר,
הופה.
It's so good and so fun to see the similarities and the differences from the novel. So thank you for sharing those clips and for the conversation. Yella.
Yes, first of all, you both win a Nobel Prize for presenting such a beautiful, thoughtful discussion today. It's what we really needed, I think, to hear on what's going on. It was very interesting and motivating. And thank you for kicking off our 100th Centennial celebrations with authors who are affiliated with Hebrew University and alumni from Canada who went to Hebrew University. We're trying to build a great relationship there. And if you could please join us on our next one on April 28th, where we have a discussion with author Sivan Slapek on her book, Here is Still Here. We will be sending out the flyer as soon as we get it done next week. But once again, thank you for everybody for joining us, and have a rest of a good day. And thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Before we go, I saw that there was a question in the chat. Noah, do you have any idea how we can watch this series in Canada?
Unfortunately, I think that you can't. You can only watch it in Israel. But we're working on an English version, and hopefully it will happen.
I wonder it's not streaming on Izzy or any other channels. Do you know?
I'm sorry.
It's called Izzy, and it streams Israeli TV shows.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't want to. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And
Cynthia, thank you so much.
It was a real pleasure, Noah. Thank you.
For me as well. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening and for having me.
I just had a quick question that I wanted to ask, but I wanted to let people go because it's disrespectful to go over time. But when you wrote the screenplay, did you find it difficult to either change that you had to change the characters or make them different because now they're living in a visual? Like, was it frustrating?
You mean as for the way they behave, or as for their appearance, or
Maybe both. As someone who reads a lot, sometimes when I go and watch a film or a TV adaptation, I'll think to myself, that's not right. That's not that's not how I heard them and felt them. That
you
this
know,
doesn't feel right.
it's really interesting. I think that one of the things that I love most about literature is that the characters exist only in the reader's mind. And if there are 10,000 people reading Stockholm, for example, then there are 10,000 different Nillies that exist in 10,000 different heads.
That is true.
And once there is a television adaptation, then all those options, they turn into one correct answer. This is the correct answer. This is how she looks like. And this might be very different from the way people imagined it and from the way that I imagined it. For me, the solution for that is to say that they coexist. The television series does not replace the novel. There is the novel and there is the television series. And the television series is only one interpretation, it's only one suggestion of how you can read this novel, but there are so many more, and they cannot be canceled, and they should not be canceled.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you both very much for giving us of this hour and a bit. It's most appreciated. And if anybody is on the call, and if you haven't read the book, go read the book because it's excellent.
תודה.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
תודה רבה.
Bye.